video game world is full of adaptations, whether they be of movies, comics, or sometimes even books. And TV shows have not been saved from this effort to cash in on people's love for a series or universe either. And as with their movie counterparts, they often aren't all that good. Sometimes though, a TV show tie-in is not just bad, but also incredibly strange, taking the source material and twisting it so much that it bears little resemblance to the original. For today's list, we've gathered together a few of those strange adaptations, and all of these entries have been chosen by virtue of how far they stray from the show they're based on, and how weird it is to base a video game on them in the first place, at least in our opinion. Some are definitely worse than others, but all of them are absolutely bonkers. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are the 10 strangest video games based on TV shows. Number 10, Deal or No Deal. Game shows are no strangers to the video game world, with everything from Family Feud to Wipeout making their way to consoles, and at least being somewhat sensical, as they tend to take the form of multiplayer or party games. One game show that loses all of its appeal when turned virtual, however, is Deal or No Deal. Available for the PC, Game Boy Advance, Wii, DS, and even as a DVD game, Deal or No Deal follows the formula of the show, tasking the player with picking one of the cases and hoping that it holds a massive cash prize. As players progress, a banker offers them different deals based on a percentage of the amounts remaining on the board. This chance-based concept is likely why the show was so popular, as viewers got involved with hedging their bets and finding out how they would have done themselves. The main appeal, though, is the money on offer. It's kind of the whole point, perhaps even more so than any other game show. Which begs the question, why would anyone bother when there's no chance of financial compensation? That, combined with the fact the game wasn't very good, means this particular title is definitely getting a no deal from me. Number 9, Desperate Housewives the game. The popular dramedy soap opera Desperate Housewives ran for a total of 8 seasons throughout the 2000s and into the early 2010s, and followed its ensemble cast through their lives in the town of Fairview as they struggled with domestic hardships and relationship issues, as well as a multitude of mysteries that surrounded them on Wisteria Lane. The series was incredibly well received, with the first 5 seasons in particular being massive hits, and as a result, it won a good number of awards. It was perhaps inevitable then that the show would get a video game spin-off, but Desperate Housewives the game goes in a direction that is surprising to say the least. This bizarre life and social status simulator tasks players with creating a family of 3 before setting them off in a world whose aesthetic very closely matched that of The Sims 2. As they progress, players can cook, garden, play online poker, of course, and more importantly, find out the juicy secrets about their fellow Wisteria Lane housewives and use them to their advantage. Even if the show was good for its time, it's safe to say that it and the game have likely not aged particularly well, and so this title isn't worth your time unless you're desperately seeking a gossip simulator. Number 8, Fester's Quest. Making their first appearance in comics in 1938, the Addams Family found their way onto screens in 1964, introducing Gomez, Morticia, and the whole creepy, kooky cast of characters to a much wider audience and giving rise to a still continuing franchise. There are actually several games based on the family, and all of them do seem a bit strange in execution, but not in the sense that you'd expect with people who are so mysterious and spooky, instead taking the form of barely related platformers. Fester's Quest is perhaps the strangest of all though, because Uncle Fester is not a character you'd expect to be bestowed with main character status. The title takes on the form of a top-down shooter and sees everyone else in the Addams' town get abducted by aliens, with the family themselves only being saved thanks to Grandmama and her spell. As Gomez has to stay home and protect the family, it falls upon Fester to track down the others and see them to safety. This isn't all that makes the title a bit odd. The weirdest thing is that the weapon Fester has chosen to wield is a megaphone, I think that is. I suppose it's only fitting that the Addams can be found on the list of strange things, but I feel it's altogether ooky even for them. Number 7, The Adventures of Gilligan's Island. Debuting in 1964, Gilligan's Island ran for a total of 3 seasons, and followed the crew and passengers of the SS Minnow as they embarked on what was meant to be a 3-hour tour, only to encounter a storm which left them shipwrecked. Despite their many attempts to escape the circumstances brought upon them by this fateful trip, the fumbling escapades of Gilligan himself tended to do more harm than good. The show was popular well into the 1980s, which means that an attempt at adapting the classic into video game form was almost inevitable. Thus, in 1990, NES owners were treated to the adventures of Gilligan's Island, and were able to recreate the hijinks and goofs that the crew and especially Gilligan himself got up to. At least that's probably what they would have expected. What they got instead was quite a departure from the show, as players controlled the skipper as he and the AI controlled Gilligan, dodged wandering wildlife and bashed their way through a surprising number of skeletons, and problematically designed locals. With its repetitive dialogue, massively challenging level of difficulty, and lack of the original's charm, it's probably for the best that this game has been left stranded on a console of years past. Number 6. Grey's Anatomy, the video game. Medical drama Grey's Anatomy, which premiered in 2005, follows the many interns, residents and other medical staff at what was originally known as Seattle Grace Hospital. It highlights both their professional and personal lives, with the medical often taking a back seat to the romantic. It may seem like a bit of an odd fit for the video game world, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Grey's Anatomy the video game could work, perhaps as an episodic adventure. And to be fair, that's kind of what the bulk of the 2009 title aims for. What makes the game so strange is more the execution, and its inscrutable and almost universally terrible mini-games. As players progress, they will take on the role of several of the characters from the show and guide them through different conversations. However, instead of directly choosing dialogue, players will have to do a simple task to simulate conveying their feelings, exhibiting a certain mood, or performing a surgery. All equally stressful, I'm sure we can all agree. What's more is that if the player does mess up the mini-game, they have several chances to try again, meaning there's no real way for the conversation to fail. It's just the illusion of choice, unlike the title itself, which is just alluding to being a decent video game. Number 5. Pimp My Ride. Pimp My Ride started in the US as one of the multitude of strange MTV reality shows, and had a short-lived but influential time on air in the mid-2000s, and it even managed to inspire a few different versions as well as some spin-offs. Despite how popular the show was, and how popular car games and vehicle customization has always been, Pimp My Ride in video game form is strange by any measure. In theory, players are challenged to pimp out a client's ride, taking it from something old and destined for a trash heap, and turning it into an impractical eyesore that holds approximately 40% of the world's televisions, while keeping the client's wishes and personality in mind. So far, so standard car overhaul. However, unlike in the show, the player has to raise their own cash for any modifications they may want by driving around the city, slamming into objects and participating in one of two strange and basically identical minigames: Hot Steppin' or Ghost Ride the Whip. Even the customization itself is done with simplistic button mashing gameplay. In one final twist, when the car has finally been fully pimped, it's put up against another with different mods, and the client may not even pick the player's vehicle at all. Turns out Robbie Williams was right. Pimping ain't easy after all. Number 4. MASH. Long-running and much-beloved medical dramedy MASH followed the escapades of many personalities of the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital, or MASH 4077th, during the Korean War. These stories told ranged from the silly to the downright heartbreaking, often highlighting social issues in a way that was well ahead of its time, and the whole thing presented a commentary on the nature and impact of war. Oof. Got heavy there for a second. Let's move on to the video games again, shall we? First released for the Atari 2600, the game version of MASH left much to be desired in comparison to the show. Unfortunately, because of the technical limitations of the console, the gameplay boiled down to nothing more than helicoptering around to save the wounded and performing surgery. Though by all accounts it was perfectly serviceable mechanically, the appeal of the show was the humour and the ridiculous interactions of the ensemble cast, and while the episode centred around the war and the hospital, it was not the main reason for watching. As such, the approach taken by the game was odd, to say the least. If the technology had been a little more advanced, a decent video game tie-in may have been possible, but regardless, without the show's personalities, it would have been a hard sell. Number 3. Doctor Who: The First Adventure. The long-running Doctor Who series is an iconic one, originally starting in 1963 and continuing to this day as arguably one of the most popular sci-fi shows of the era. There have been no shortage of games based on the Doctor and his adventures. In fact, we here at Team TripleJump are quite familiar with this, and can confirm that there are certainly games that exist. Doctor Who: The First Adventure is, as the title suggests, the first official video game adaptation of the Time Lord's hijinks. Released for the BBC Micro in 1983, the game focuses on the 5th Doctor, and that's pretty much the only thing it has in common with the show. Oh, lives are also called regenerations instead, so That counts, right? Otherwise, the whopping 4 games that are on offer in this strange compilation boil down to clones of other popular games of the time period. The text on the start screen indicates some overarching story, but once players choose one of the levels, it becomes clear that they are just replicas of Pac-Man, Frogger, Space Invaders, and the board game Battleships, with some light theming. Worse still, some of them are difficult to even look at. It's a shame that the Doctor has never gotten a decent video game adaptation, but I suppose there's still time. Number 2, Fear Factor Unleashed. Fear Factor is yet another show from the 2000s that is both strange and wholly ill-advised. Each episode followed its contestants as they performed different professional stunts to earn the cash prize at the end. And if they were too scared or failed to complete a stunt, they were eliminated. In theory, it was an experiment meant to test participants both mentally and physically, but it was often a recipe for disaster, medical issues, and potential long-term trauma. Why anyone would think that a show all about crazy stunts and visceral personalised terror would work as a video game in anything other than VR is a mystery, but clearly the tie-in cash potential was too alluring. Fear Factor Unleashed released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance, and has players personalise a character, distributing points over 4 stats, nerve, steadiness, stomach, and stamina, before assigning a phobia. After this, the game starts proper, in the form of 12 different minigames centred around action, skill, and ickiness. The problem is that Fear Factor is a concept that only works in person, and not when button mashing on a handheld console. Honestly, the scariest thing about this title is the fact that it got made at all. And number 1, Home Improvement Power Tool Pursuit. Perhaps the most ridiculous of completely unrelated TV show tie-ins, Home Improvement Power Tool Pursuit, is impressive only in its commitment to having as little to do as possible with the show. Home Improvements aired in the US from 1991 to 1999 and centered around the Taylor family, with each episode including show within the show Tool Time, hosted by Tim Taylor and his friend Al. Because Tim was incredibly accident-prone, Tool Time almost never went according to plan, and disaster and hijinks were sure to ensue. To its credit, Home Improvement Power Tool Pursuit does start with the filming of an episode of Tool Time, with Tim preparing to show off a new line of power tools. However, he finds out they've all gone missing and leaves to search for them. It's here that the game takes a turn for the bizarre, turning into a 2D platformer that follows Tim as he not only hunts other stolen tools, but also fights dinosaurs, robots, mummies, and other wholly out-of-place enemies as he progresses. While it's hard to imagine how the show would be turned into a game effectively, it was considered weird even for the time, and has gone down not only as a strange TV show tie-in, but perhaps one of the weirdest video games ever.